All right, Algebra 1, first and ninth period. This is the last video for the day. I've had a lot. But this is a practice problem. Okay, so we did notes, we did definitions, we defined, we had formulas. We did an example problem. This is a practice problem. So if you want to pause it here, write all this stuff down and try and figure out all this information, go for it now, because I'm just going to go through this. But we have this function, we got f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 3. We want to figure out how does it open, what's the y-intercept, what's the axis of symmetry, what's the vertex, what's the min and the max, domain and range. Okay. So again, if you want to try this on your own, pause it and work on it, and then I'm going to go through and you can check your answers. Alright, so here comes the answer key. As soon as, I always like to figure out what A, B, and C are. Okay. So A is the number in front of x squared, A is 1, B is the number in front of x, B is 6, and C is the constant, C is 3. Now right away, because A is positive, A is a positive 1, we know it opens up. Because we know what the C value is, we automatically know the y-intercept. The y-intercept's 3. Or you could write it as 0, 3. Axis of symmetry, opposite of B over 2A. The opposite of B is negative 6 over 2 times A, which would be 2. So the axis of symmetry is the line x equals negative 3. So again, that's because it's the opposite of B over 2A. Negative 6 over 2 times 1, which is negative 3. The vertex, once you know the axis of symmetry, you just plug it in to find the vertex. So we're going to plug in negative 3 into all those x values. So it would be negative 3 squared plus 6 times negative 3 plus 3. Okay. That's 9 minus 18 plus 3, which is negative 6. So my vertex is the point negative 3, negative 6. The axis of symmetry and the vertex is the only work you really have to do. You have to plug it into the formula and then plug that back into the equation. The min or the max, well, since it opens up, it's automatically a min. And the value of the min is always going to be the y value of the vertex. So we're going to have a minimum at negative 6. And lastly, domain and range. Domain, all real numbers. The range, if we have a minimum at negative 6, that means all our values are going to be bigger than negative 6. So all of our y values are going to be greater than or equal to negative 6. And again, you could write these as intervals, negative infinity to infinity for the domain, negative 6, bracket negative 6, to infinity for the range. All right, let's graph this. I'm going to delete all this work so keep it on the same page. Okay. Remember, for a graph, we want 5 points. Okay, so we want to have 5 points on our graph. I'm not sure if we have 5 yet. If we don't, we'll have to find an additional point, which is done just by plugging in more values. We don't need a full graph. Start with the vertex. The vertex is negative 3, negative 6. So left 3, down 6. Okay. I also like to graph the axis of symmetry. It's going to help us out when we need to flip points over. Axis of symmetry is at -3. Remember, the axis of symmetry only crosses the graph one place, and it's at the vertex. So if you're graphing this and your vertex and your axis of symmetry aren't at the same place, you probably have a mistake in there somewhere. All right, let's go to the y-intercept. The y-intercept's at 3. Okay, so y-axis 3. Now again, if you know one point on the one side of the axis symmetry, you automatically know that same mirrored point on the other side. So this is 3 spots to the right of the axis symmetry, which means we could also go 3 spots to the left. Okay. So that's all the information I found. So I will need an additional point. Okay. We have a couple options. We could plug in, let's see, we don't know what happens at -2. We don't know what happens at -1. We could plug in those points. Okay. Now when you're plugging in points, all you're doing is plugging them into the original function for x and figuring out what their y's are. Okay. So I already did this off to the side. If I plug in -1, plug in -1 for x, you should get -2 out, which is going to correspond to the point -1, -2, which also corresponds to the flipped point of -5, -2. You could have also found another point. You could have plugged in -2. If you plugged in -2, you would have gotten -5 out. Okay. Which corresponds to the point -2, -5. Which also flips to -4, -5. So those are the possible additional points you could have picked. So now this graph's going to be great. We got 7 points on this graph. Do your best to connect the dots. That's bad. I missed those. That's all right. That's good enough. Okay. So there's a practice problem. All right. All the info is in the Google Classroom. I know it's kind of a lot today. We're not going to have as much tomorrow. We're not going to have anything tomorrow. Yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm planning a live stream or something tomorrow if you want to ask questions in real time. All right. Enjoy your Tuesday.